So I'm going to read something here that Rav Tzuriel wrote that was in the news 10 years ago already. Okay. So, and I think it's even more relevant today because things have definitely changed. You could find this. Rav Tzuriel signed on the letter encouraging people to go to Har HaBayit. Okay? It was signed by people like Rav Ariel and Rav Lior and Rabbi Rabinovich, the usuals. And Rav Tzuriel was also signatory. You could see his signature in the declaration in the appendix to Rabbi Wolfson's Har HaBayit book. Go get it. Okay, what did Rav Tzuriel say? Concerning our era. We shouldn't be accusing Am Yisrael because they're not, let's say, demanding the Beis Hamikdash. It says in David's time, people fell in war and died in plague. Why? Because the people did not demand the rebuilding of the temple. The book begins with the destruction. What happened?
What does that mean?
Exactly. The Mishkan was set up in Shiloh. According to the pshat of the Gemara and the Mishnah and the Bible, that was what God demanded. God said, build me a sanctuary. And eventually, your sanctuary will have a permanent place, a place God will choose. So in Joshua's time, they conquered the land, and Joshua told them, now put the sanctuary there. That's what God says. He wants it. This is the holy place. So they built the sanctuary there and became permanent. And all the mitzvahs came into force. And it's even called a bias because they built a permanent structure around the Mishkan. The roof was still the same pitched tent, but eventually they built a larger altar. They built buildings around it. They built a smaller scale Beis Hamikdash, and that lasted for a few centuries. And it was destroyed by the Philistines. And the old Mishkan, all its old components and things had been evacuated, and they set up the Mishkan in Nov the same way it had been in the desert. But it was incomplete. And they said that now the mitzvahs don't apply. You could offer sacrifice outside. And that was the way it was during Samuel's time, Saul's time, and David's time. And David was the first one to wake up and say, maybe we should go back to the old state. I want to build a permanent temple, but I want to build it even bigger and more grand. Like, not any of this temporary, you could take it apart and move it thing that we've been doing until now. That was his proposal to the prophet. And the answer from God was, I've been waiting for someone to say that. Okay? The problem is, the people, David HaMelech was the first one. Maybe there's some individuals, but it wasn't a national idea. So David HaMelech led a revolution such that by the time he died, the people were saying, when's this old codger going to kick the bucket so we can build a Beis Hamikdash? But originally, he was the first one thinking about it. So it says that, unlike in Joshua's time, when people fell in battle, it was remarkable. We only have a record of one battle. In David HaMelech's time, war was normal. Yes, they won. They were doing a lot, but a lot of people were dying. There was casualties. So it says people were dying in war, and also there was a plague. Famines. And ultimately, there was another plague. And David HaMelech was shown, here's where you put the altar. Now get going with building a Beis Hamikdash. So the sages say the people, all these people died in David HaMelech's time is because they were not demanding the building of the temple. So Rabbi Tzuriel says we can't do that. We can't say that today that we're suffering because of this. We shouldn't accuse Am Yisrael. It's even worse if we say that we're you know what, we're okay with the block on Har HaBayit. That's what we got to do. It doesn't make any sense. If you're not going to demand the Beis Hamikdash, if you're not going to let Jews go to Har HaBayit, why are you okay with Arabs being there and running the place? That doesn't make sense. Playing soccer and everything. Praot sharavim porim yorim aleinu avanim uchlei mashkit. The riots they're doing up there, they throw rocks down on us, right? Or other, weapons, rubble from the temple. He's talking about there were times when they would gather wheelbarrows full of rocks and debris on the Temple Mount and get to near the western wall. And when Jews come in the morning, they would throw stuff down on them. And thankfully, no one was killed by such thing. It's very easily. Perhaps this is coming from our just relinquishing, okay, our hold on the holy mountain in Jerusalem. Okay? Just like in David HaMelech's time, and they weren't demanding, they were just quiet. Not enough people saying, build this temple. can't accuse people. He said, don't accuse them. But he's saying that there is room to accuse. Okay? Therefore, hava v'nachzik tova l'torei lev. Let us appreciate. Nachzik tova is appreciate those who are pure of heart, holim b'torat haguf l'Har HaBayit, who go up in purity of body to the Temple Mount, ulim komot hamasumanim shehem be'emet michutz letafkud ama al shel Har HaBayit, and those who go to the places that are certainly beyond even the 500 by 500 amma square area of halachic Har HaBayit. Har HaBayit is much bigger than 500 by 500 ammas, and it's also that's roughly a square. It's actually sort of rhomboid. They're not perfectly right angled, but that's not the point. The point is there are large parts of Har HaBayit that you can definitely go to. Not a problem. Anashim elu heim shluchei Am Yisrael. The people go to Har HaBayit are the emissaries of Am Yisrael. Heim b'masayim anoazim misarim cherpa me'aleinu. They, with their bold actions, okay, are removing the shame from upon us. Let's be a little bit poetic about this. V'nomar lahem chizku ve'imtzu. We should tell them to be strong. Good job. Okay? Well, please.
Why is he using David HaMelech as an example instead of using like Zechariah, Chagiga, and all of the other Nevi'im? Because only there do we see that Hashem actually take us to task for not rebuilding the Beit HaMikdash. But in David HaMelech time, he suspended it because he said David HaMelech had too much blood on his hands. So he told David, your son would do it.
But the people hadn't even thought about it. Why do you use this? Maybe Rav Turel could have brought that example, but he was using this as a starting point. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you could say the same point. It could be there was two points in history where God said, "Why are you not building a temple? You're suffering for things." That's true. That's the major part of the book of Chagai. Is it's a very short book, but the major lesson is why haven't you built a Beis HaMikdash already? You're sitting around and waiting. There was a mitzvah. You should have done it already. And Achinami, if people learn Sefer Chagai, that's why I wanted to bring up now something that I find is surprising. I do not like this website. There's people who like it. We're talking about Hanukkah and Daniel, if you guys can see this. You know the book of Daniel? You know what? I've never sat down with anybody, maybe Rabbi Barchim, perhaps once, and discussed the book of Daniel with them. Okay? So the people who put together the Tanakh for Steinsaltz, the Korean one, so they were having discussions. But we were never in person sitting around the Beis Medrash learning the book of Daniel. Okay, so people who write Perushim, the book, and there are people who study it, they're Rishonim. But the book of Daniel, when you think about it, aside from the fact that you don't study it that much because of its obscurity, I don't know if they teach it racist, I don't know. Maybe they have a rabbi like that, Rabbi Liebtag type who learns these things. So what did we see? We saw with them that definitely no one's discussing this book when Hanukkah comes around. There's no connection. Do Jews connect the book to Hanukkah at all?
I don't think so.
Oh, of course not. So, yeah. So let's think about that for a second. Okay? When, let's say, certain holidays roll around, there's the usual literature. Yeah. There's no book of the Bible in Yom Kippur, but we read about Yom Kippur on the Torah. There's what to know about it. There's halachas. When it comes to Hanukkah, we learn halachas, but we don't have a Megillah like on Purim. Everybody knows the story of Purim. There's a book of the Bible about it. We do not have anything in the Bible about Hanukkah necessarily. There's no book, there's no Megillah you read on Hanukkah. We have Megillah Antiochus, which is a cheap imitation. It's much later. It's not Chazal. It's not official. It actually contradicts many parts of history, even our own Jewish books. Have you heard of Antiochus Megillah?
Yeah.
Really? Have you seen it? It's not even apocryphal. You're confused. You're thinking about the books of the Maccabees.
Okay.
Well, Chashmonaim in Hebrew, and books of the Maccabees. So those are part of, the Christians hold that's part of their Bible. We hold it's not part of the Bible. But it's written by Jews. It's been translated back into Hebrew. It's accurate. It's written by Jews from the time. It has the whole Hanukkah story. That's something. Megillah Antiochus is much shorter. It changes things around. It's more like a Medrash says, Uncle Moshe type of version of the book of the Maccabees. It used to be printed in a major sitter in America, the Birnbaum sitter. If you know about the Birnbaum sitter, you probably discovered an old copy in a shul or something. Before ArtScroll, there was Birnbaum. Okay. Paltiel Birnbaum, Philip Birnbaum, he's siddurim. They used to be the standard in all the shuls. Okay. That and the Sansino Chumash. Yeah, so I remember there's still a shul where I grew up. It had Birnbaum sitters and Sansino Chumashim. And already the young Israels had Art Scroll Sidurim and Art Scroll Chumashim. Nowadays, you go to the shuls, they have Korean Sidurim and Korean Chumashim. Okay, so I take a little credit for that, a drop of credit. Okay, but I don't think anything is necessarily superior. Each time period has its Chumash and its Siddur. But you don't associate the book of Daniel with Hanukkah. No one's going to tell you read Daniel come Hanukkah time. The Jews don't talk about it. Chazal don't make the connection. But people who are, and I hate to say this, I know that I have associates who consider the Torah.com to be a good source for kosher Bible criticism, like the scholarly approach and Bible criticism and the rest of that stuff. But I don't like it. Most of their writers are a bunch of heretics. Okay, I'm just saying the Reform rabbis and stuff. Yeah, there's your occasional, Orthodox fellow here. I don't know what he's doing with them. Okay, and I don't understand that they undermine a lot of people's faith. If you just say, well, just being academic about this, if you tell people that, the book, what they thought is an ancient book of the Bible is actually written much later in history and not by a prophet. So why does it have any authority to it? So they have these ideas that are accepted by the type of people who read this stuff. But for the masses, or people who are very faithful, it doesn't work. They haven't produced a major, let's say, posek type who really holds of these things, certainly an Ayyei Haredi, which doesn't prove anything. So why do I bring this up? Because I wanted to show you that if you look over here, that they're basically they look in the book of Daniel and they say that the book is basically written. Okay, here I'll read this to you. Okay, you know anything about the structure of the book? Mm-hmm. So the first 6 chapters present stories about the life of protagonists. Yeah. Daniel, Hanai, Mishon, Azariah. Sometimes their stories just Daniel, sometimes just them, and then they drop out. And then the second half is visions and the beasts and the things. Some are in Hebrew, some in Aramaic. Okay, some put them all together. Okay, scholars agree that the numerous historical allusions in the apocalyptic visions refer to none other than Antiochus IV Epiphanes. They basically the second half of the book is about the Archville and the Hanukkah story. And here, hold on. Okay, fine. They have the 4 beasts. So that's what they point out here. Now it's true, by the way, the fact that they're warning of the advent of the Greeks is actually explicit. In the last 3 chapters, it says the Persians are going to be pushed away by the Greeks. Here's what they say: Daniel didn't exist in Babylonian times. First of all, the first half of the book, we don't know why, just stories, Jewish folk stories that were made up in later times, in Greek times, based on things they heard. The name Daniel already is an old name, so they put Daniel in Babylonian. It's anachronistic. They never existed. Next, the book was written in Maccabean times, in Antiochus' time, about Antiochus and his oppressions, and it talks about the Maccabean revolt. Okay, and it's basically a retcon. Okay? It's a book written Maccabean times by Jews, and it says all these things was predicted by Daniel. Why are they doing this? Why do they make the first half of the book with all those Daniel stories? We don't know. Why is it that the Daniel doesn't talk about the Maccabean victory also? Because they wrote this during the war, but they never went back and added the parts, and we won, and make that part of the story. So, and they prove this by saying it so well describes the Maccabean wars that it must have been written by someone who witnessed it. And it couldn't have been written before that, because there's no such thing. Here's where the fear comes in. There's no such thing as someone who can so accurately predict the future before it happens. Well, I don't know about that. That's what we call a Navi, or a Navi type.
Right, he was a dreamer.
Whether he's a Navi is Machon Shilo, Barbanel, and others in the Rambam. But the Rambam says still Kisvei Kod. The Rambam says this level of prophecy here. Even the Rambam's level of prophecies is not like the most agreed upon, the thesis in rabbinic Judaism, let's just say. Okay, Rashi would call people like David HaMelech, Shlomo HaMelech, and Daniel types of prophets. The Rambam, strictly speaking, does not. But whatever, it's semantics basically. Okay, where do their books end up in the Bible? Fine. If you have such a thing, they're basically saying that this book is definitely from Maccabean times. It is not written by someone who had the capacity to tell the future, because there's no such thing. Okay, that's what it is. It's from that time period. And then, for some reason, they say, but it was written very specifically during the wars, but not before the Jews won the wars. Now, what?
No, I was gonna say their point doesn't make sense though, because even before you get into the Maccabean wars and everything like that, they talk about other things before that, like the going in and the destruction of the first Beit HaMikdash, which had nothing to do with the time of the Maccabean.
Yeah. Well, they lead it up. They're trying to, make it look like there was a succession of kingdoms. So the Babylonian kingdom represented by this beast, and then the Persian kingdom by the bear. And,
what the text says it.
Yeah.
The text talks about the different kingdoms and the beast, but then they want to. What blows their argument is that small little beast that then comes out of that, because what does that have to do with Maccabean? That small little beast is something that...
Yeah, okay, well, I also agree. And I also say that, so I lean to all those stories also. But as Bible critics and all that, trying to break it apart, here you have something from an Orthodox rabbi, Rabbi New Rochelle, who, actually I want to talk to him about this. I'm pointing to the screen right here. He says there's evidence for Daniel's late composition, anachronistic use of Greek words. Okay, so they could have put in words after that. I think it's so anachronistic, by the way. Rashi and others, Medrash, point out Greek words already in the Torah. Okay? And we're talking about fancy musical instruments. So the Greeks had fancy words for musical instruments. So the fact that word like symphony is there in Bavel shouldn't be so much of a surprise. It already says that Solomon was better than the best musician. Right? That's what it says. Better than all the East and the West. Right? So you don't think there are Greeks, they're Egyptians who heard about Solomon and came from all far and wide. Queen of Sheba comes and says, wow, you're really good at this. You don't think the idea of Greek music, ancient Greek stuff, didn't come all the way to Babylonia? They have no contact whatsoever. So I don't think it's such a crazy thing. So like I said, there's Greek in the Torah.
I don't know if you're familiar with Rabbi Yoel Ben Nun.
Yeah.
Who gives I was reading one of his Sefarim on his commentary on Yeshayahu, and I think he does a very good job in painting and demonstrating how Am Yisrael in the time of the kingship had a lot of political power and influence in the world, and how they really interacted with the known world at that time period. And I think what a lot of people do is they lose perspective of that.
Yes.
Because of the fact that we're not so caught up on all the other nations, but we did have interactions with them. They had interactions with us. And I think people lose contact of that.
Certainly. Sharos Mitsuyim. So it says here's the question, which I thought was silly because he's talking like a Bible critic. He asked, why is the connection between Daniel and Hanukkah so unknown? Okay. So he says, despite the specificity of the description of the persecution lead up to Hanukkah and Daniel, very few Jews, even among the learned, seem familiar with the connection between the Festival of Lights and this obscure book in the back of Tanakh. Moreover, even classic rabbinic literature itself, including the Talmud, fails to note the impressive correspondence between the geopolitical events of this time period, negative 332 to negative 167 of their common era, and Daniel's vision. Why is that? And here's his answer. In my view, the best explanation for the silence is that the Talmudic sages had limited knowledge of world history from the Greek period. Okay? So there you go. And that's what he says. Even was referring to the Roman Empire, particularly to the reign of Titus, while Sadia Gaon interprets this as referring to Rome and foreshadowing the Ishmaelite Arabs. It's like, why do they know that? Daniel's spot on leading up to the Greeks. The fourth kingdom, the kingdom stopped with Greece. And the reference to of the fourth kingdom and splitting into the horns and the 10 resulting kingdoms, that's not referring to the Roman Empire's successors or to the successors of the world Islamic empire, right? Like many Mepharshim say. So they just said this out of lack of awareness or ignorance. It says the Abarbanel was the first who started catching on to this. And with all due respect, that's why I slammed the table. I said, the sages knew history. You think every single sage didn't know about Greek history? Somehow people who lived 1,000 years later learned this period's history better than the ones who lived there just 100 years afterwards, 200 years afterwards. And as far as that Seder Olam thing, the Seder Olam is just one opinion in Chazal, like Rabbi Stav taught. Seder Olam is obviously forced. Numbers there work out too well. And already Rishonim pointed out, we know the real truth, that really it's not exact. Even the Ramban has things, Balamor points this out. So I don't think that's the answer. The answer is, like, if you just read Mefarshim, Das Mikra. Das Mikra gives a good introduction to Daniel, very long, explaining what every major Mefarish took to this book. And the answer is the sages did not read the book of Daniel like a Bible critic. They read the book of Daniel as discussing Daniel lived in Bavel, and Daniel talked about a much wider period of time. He talked about from his beasts and his visions, talk about the Babylonians and the Persians and the Greeks and the Romans and people who came after the Romans. That's how they always, yes, there are specific things when it says specifically these are the Greeks, and certain things are interpreted, referring to Antiochus and the Greeks, but not all of it, by far not all of it. And they also see that those predictions, if you're reading like a Bible critic, all the predictions, like to predict the times, when will the end come and all that, is talking about when will the Maccabees beat Antiochus. But Maimonides and everybody else, Rashi, name your great Jewish sage, saw this as a prediction of when the ultimate redemption is supposed to come, when the Messiah is supposed to come. By the way, a lot of people try to predict such things that were wrong all the time. Even a Barbanel. The point is, the sages did not. They had contact with this book. They knew about the Greeks. They knew what this book was about. They knew when it was written, and they saw it as mentioning the Greeks as just one of many historical phenomena, and not the main part of this book. I'm surprised he doesn't give that answer. And that's why the Jews do not, culturally, we never connected this book to our Hanukkah celebration. If it was from Hanukkah times, and if it had been specifically about Hanukkah and the Maccabean War, we would have used it. Like if we considered a holy book and it was written then, so we would have made it the Megillas Esther of Purim. Okay, are we lying? We said that no. All the books of the Bible end with Anshe Knesset HaGadolah, who preceded the miracle of Hanukkah by a few centuries, whatever it might be, right? And then we write a book that we incorporate into Tanakh, but we say it has nothing to do with the holiday that it ostensibly has to do with. That sounds crazy. Okay. As a matter of fact, there is a book that we all acknowledge has to do with Hanukkah, written by the Hasmoneans themselves, the Book of the Maccabees, or Hashmonaim, and it describes this. And we said, sorry, that doesn't count as Tanakh. We don't accept Tanakh now. But a crazier book that written in code, we will accept and retcon and say, but that book, imagine you lived at Hanukkah times and you're a regular Jew. You know about the Book of the Maccabees and you're saying the sages are holding this as, even though it's correct, it has to do with this new holiday, we don't accept books into the Bible now. But some other book, now they're telling me, is part of my Bible, always was. It sounds like a prank, but it has nothing to do with the holiday. Doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't make any sense. You have to make us out to all be a bunch of idiots, So that's why that's why Jews do not connect. That's why you don't have any cultural thing. No one's taking out a book of Daniel. It's not even nowadays. There are people who do read the books of the Maccabees around Hanukkah time and study them. Har HaBayit mentions it. No one is looking. No, at least regular Jews, Orthodox Jews, from Jews who like Hanukkah, are opening up the book of Daniel around Hanukkah time and saying, let's connect. It's not connected. There is no real connection. Okay, look, the book of Zechariah mentions war with the Greeks also at the back. We don't necessarily connect Zechariah exactly with Hanukkah, except there's a Haftorah early in the book about that. The Haftorah for Shabbos Hanukkah is taken from the book of Zechariah at the beginning. The Greeks are mentioned at the end. We don't say like Zechariah is talking specifically the whole book. It's 100% about Hanukkah. Yeah, there are things about it, but yeah, this is a silly idea. I'm surprised by it. I'm surprised that reasonably educated or intelligent people could fall for this. But the problem is the negates horror of Bible criticism is that you like to undermine things. Look, I like to be a little bit subversive. Okay, I believe that Torah study has to be subversive. That is, you have to unlearn what you learned. You have to learn it right. You have to take apart. If you had a conception or misconception, you have to have your misconception removed. Okay, so in that sense, I tell people that learning the Beis Yosef for halacha before Shulchan Aruch is the most subversive thing you could do for many yeshiva guys, because it actually shows them what's going on and makes them realize, wait, so why don't we hold this way? The Beis Yosef shows you all the opinions, and then you say, but everybody does X. Maybe Y is better. And the Vilna comes to the conclusion, yeah, Y is better. The Beis Yosef, will tell you major machlokas in this regard, and I hold like this. And then you say, but I really like the arguments for the other side. Okay, so that's subversive. So Torah study should be subversive. But some people just like subversive for the sake of subversive. They like it that all the Jews think that their books of the Bible were concluded and finally edited in the year in negative 300 something, and that's it. No one touched the Bible. And they want to tell you, no, really, there's stuff in the Bible that come even from 200 years later. And when the sages told you that, they were just lying to you, And what does it mean? It wasn't written by people of prophecy or people who were inspired. It means something else. It means that these people are just really smart and they're inspired, and the religion is always developing. And therefore, when Reform rabbis come and tell you could do things differently, it's because there's a continuing revelation. Thank you, but that's not how. That doesn't appeal to people who have real faith. So it works for educated people who want to be subversive or don't want to just want to undermine what they know. Fine, and they can still believe in God. It's all more power to them, by the way. They might be fully observant of halacha, and they might have their own rationalizations for doing so, but they're undermining other people's faith. And that's not good. The website's full of these things. Like there's no medrash here. There's no moral lessons. Like the Ram would say, but what's the lesson? What are you getting at this? It's just undermining things. But there's no strengthening halachic observance. There's no deeper faith. Or the Rambam says, the problem with calculating when the Messiah is going to come, or even studying what's going to be in the Muslim Mashiach, does not lead to something. He says something very important. He says, you want to learn to love God and fear God, right? That's already at the beginning of his halachic book. You want to contemplate God's great works. You'll come to fear him. Wow, amazing. The cosmos. And then you'll come to love God. You'll come to love God. You'll do his commandments. You'll want to connect to God all the time. It's like he says, you ever been lovesick? You've been in love? You can't stop thinking about her. The people who really connect to God, they're in love with God. This doesn't bring you to love of God. This doesn't bring you to fear of God, doing certain things. It just brings you to
nonsense.
Not even nonsense, just whatever. Even mathematics can bring you to love of God. You see the wisdom in the creation, but there's no seeing wisdom in creation. Just taking things apart. Okay? That's why I don't think it's even really a form of Torah study. But that's just my opinion. Other people think this is necessary because without this, there'd be certain people who want to completely off the derech. So this is for a specific group of people who need this so that they'll continue keeping Shabbos and Kashrus.